What happened on September 11th, 2001 explains why you take off your shoes at airports, why the NSA can read your emails, and why America spent 20 years fighting wars that never ended. One morning, two towers, and a choice that transformed freedom into security theater. Most people think 9/11's changed us because of what happened that morning. That's not what changed us. What changed us was what we chose to do next. September 11th, 2001, New York City. 8:46 a.m. American Airlines Flight 11 strikes the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Floor 93 through 99. People in Lower Manhattan look up. Some think it's an accident, a small plane, pilot error. For 17 minutes, that's what most of the world believes, an accident. At 9:03 a.m., that theory dies. United Airlines Flight 175 hits the South Tower. Floor 77 through 85, live on television. Millions watching. The second plane erases all doubt. This isn't an accident. This is an attack. And in the 102 minutes between the first impact and the second tower's collapse, the world as we knew it ended. Not because of what fell, but because of what we built in its place. But to understand what changed, you need to understand what that morning actually was. Not the version you've seen in documentaries. Not the sanitized memorials. The confusion. The choices. The 102 minutes when nobody knew what was happening. Let's go back to 8:46 a.m., before the second plane, when it's still just smoke and confusion. 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11. The plane hits the North Tower at 440 miles per hour. It's a Boeing 767, fully fueled for a cross-country flight to Los Angeles. 10,000 gallons of jet fuel. The impact severs all three emergency stairwells above the 91st floor. Everyone above that point, approximately 1,360 people, is trapped. Below the impact zone, people start evacuating. Some floors get announcements telling them to stay put. The building is secure. Return to your desks. Some people listen. Some don't. The ones who don't listen survive. Rick Rescorla is the head of security for Morgan Stanley. His offices are in the South Tower, the one that hasn't been hit yet. He hears the explosion in the North Tower, sees the smoke, and he doesn't wait for official instructions. He starts evacuating. His company has 2,700 employees in the South Tower. He's been drilling them for years, practicing evacuation procedures. Everyone thought he was paranoid. He's not paranoid. He's prepared. Here's what nobody talks about. Rick Rescorla predicted this attack. In 1990, 11 years before 9/11's, he co-authored a report warning that the World Trade Center was vulnerable to a truck bomb in the underground parking garage. In 1993, terrorists tried exactly that. A truck bomb in the basement. 6 people killed. The towers survived. Rescorla updated his report. Said next time they'll try from the air. Nobody listened. Now, at 8:46 a.m. on September 11th, his prediction is coming true. And he's evacuating 2,700 people from a building that hasn't been hit yet. This decision will save nearly all of them. 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175. 17 minutes after the first impact. The second plane hits the South Tower, floors 77 through 85. Rick Rescorla is in the stairwell with his employees. The building shakes. People panic. He keeps them moving, singing songs over his megaphone. God bless America, keeping people calm, keeping them going down. By 9:03 a.m., the world knows this isn't an accident. 2 planes, 2 towers. This is coordinated. At the Federal Aviation Administration's command center in Herndon, Virginia, managers are staring at radar screens, trying to understand what's happening. Here's where it gets worse. There aren't just 2 planes. There are 4. American Airlines Flight 77 is off course. Heading toward Washington, D.C., air traffic controllers have lost contact. United Airlines Flight 93 is also off course. Passengers are making phone calls, saying the plane has been hijacked. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 hits the Pentagon, the headquarters of the United States Department of Defense, the most secure building in America. A passenger jet just flew into it. 125 people in the Pentagon die instantly. All 64 people on the plane. And Flight 93 is still in the air, still heading toward Washington. The FIA makes a decision that has never been made in American history. At 9:45 a.m., they ground all aircraft. Every single plane in American airspace, over 4,500 flights, land immediately. Wherever you are, the skies over America go silent for the first time since the Wright brothers. Back in New York, the South Tower is burning. The North Tower is burning. Both buildings are evacuation in chaos. People are making impossible choices. Above the impact zones, the heat is unbearable. Jet fuel is burning at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Steel doesn't melt at that temperature, but it weakens. It bends. Some people trapped above the fires make a choice. They jump. Between 50 and 200 people jump from the towers. We don't know the exact number. Nobody wants to count. The falls take approximately 10 seconds. People land at 150 miles per hour. News cameras capture it. Broadcasters make a decision in real time. Don't show this. Don't replay it. This is too much. But the people on the ground see it. The firefighters climbing the stairs see it. They can't unsee it. 9:59 a.m. The South Tower collapses. It's been 56 minutes since it was hit. The second tower hit, but the first to fall. The collapse takes 10 seconds, 110 floors, 500,000 tons of steel and concrete, disintegrating into dust and debris. Rick Rescorla is still inside. After evacuating his 2,700 employees, he went back in to look for stragglers, to make sure everyone got out. He's last seen on the 10th floor. Heading back up, his body is never found. Of the 2,700 Morgan Stanley employees in the South Tower, only 13 die, including Rescorla. Without him, hundreds more would have died, maybe thousands. One man, one decision at 8:46 a.m., before his building was even hit. The North Tower is still standing. Firefighters are inside, climbing the stairs, carrying 100 pounds of gear, trying to reach people trapped above. They don't know the South Tower just collapsed. Their radios don't work inside the building. Communication is broken. Some of them were above the 70th floor when the South Tower falls. They keep climbing. At 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 crashes in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Passengers on the plane have been making phone calls. They know about the World Trade Center. They know about the Pentagon. They know this plane is a weapon. They vote. They're going to fight back. "Let's roll," says passenger Todd Beamer. They storm the cockpit. The hijackers realize they're losing control. They crash the plane into an empty field rather than let passengers take over. All 44 people on board die, but the plane never reaches its target. Later evidence suggests it was heading for the U.S. Capitol or the White House. The passengers of Flight 93 are the first people to fight back in the war on terror. And they win. They just don't survive. 10:28 a.m. The North Tower collapses. It's been 102 minutes since it was hit. The first tower struck, the last to fall. Another 10-second collapse. Another plume of dust rolling through lower Manhattan like a tsunami. 343 firefighters die. 72 police officers. 55 military personnel at the Pentagon. 2,977 people total. It's the deadliest terrorist attack in human history. And it's over in 102 minutes. By 10:30 a.m. on September 11, 2001, the attack is finished. But the response to wars, the surveillance, the security state, that's just beginning. Here's what most people forget about that morning. For 102 minutes, nobody knew what was happening. Was this just New York? Were other cities being attacked? Was this the start of World War III? Fighter jets were scrambled, but they didn't know where to go. There were reports of phantom planes that didn't exist. Confusion everywhere. President Bush was in Florida, reading to elementary school students when the second plane hit. Secret Service rushed him to Air Force One. For hours, he didn't land. They kept him in the air, moving, because nobody knew if Air Force One was a target. The President of the United States spent September 11th hiding in the sky. When he finally addressed the nation that night, from the Oval Office, he said, "We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them." That sentence, that one sentence, would justify 20 years of war. Afghanistan, Iraq, drone strikes, Guantanamo, torture, mass surveillance. All of it traces back to September 11th, not because of what happened that morning, but because of what we decided to do next. In 102 minutes, 2,977 people died. In the 25 years since, over 900,000 people have died in the wars that followed. 7,000 American troops, 177,000 Afghan and Iraqi civilians, hundreds of thousands more from indirect causes: starvation, disease, displacement. The attack lasted 102 minutes. The response is still going. Rescorla saved 2,700 people by ignoring official instructions, by acting on instinct, by preparing for something everyone said would never happen. The United States government did the opposite. They ignored warnings, failed to prevent the attack, then spent 2 decades building a security apparatus that wouldn't have stopped it anyway. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The hijackers on September 11th didn't use advanced technology. They used box cutters, razor blades, and surprise. Everything we built after 9/11's TSA, NSA surveillance, the Patriot Act, the wars, none of it would have stopped 19 men with box cutters. But it changed America anyway. Within 24 hours, the country was unrecognizable, united in grief, united in anger, and ready to do whatever it took to make sure this never happened again. Whatever it took. That phrase would justify things that would have been unthinkable on September 10th. The next morning, September 12th, America woke up different. And it would stay different. Forever. Revolutions don't happen in the streets. They happen in the silence after tragedy, when fear replaces debate. September 11th, 2001, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. President George W. Bush sits in the Oval Office, preparing to address the nation. It's been 10 hours since the second tower fell, 10 hours since the Pentagon burned, 10 hours since Flight 93 crashed in Pennsylvania. America has been watching television all day. Replays of the planes hitting, the towers collapsing, people running through streets covered in ash. Now they're waiting for the president to tell them what happens next. At 8:30 p.m., Bush begins. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist attacks. He speaks for 4 minutes. The key line comes near the end. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. That sentence, those 14 words, will justify invading 2 countries, killing hundreds of thousands of people, and spending $8 trillion over the next 20 years. But on September 11th, nobody's thinking about that yet. They're thinking about revenge. Here's what happened in the 24 hours after the towers fell. The changes that happened so fast, most people didn't notice until it was too late. September 11th, 6 p.m. Building 7 of the World Trade Center collapses. It wasn't hit by a plane, but fires from the collapsing towers weakened it. It falls into its own footprint. Most people don't even know Building 7 existed, but its collapse will fuel conspiracy theories for decades. By evening, Lower Manhattan is a war zone. Dust covering everything. Fires still burning. Rescue workers digging through rubble, looking for survivors. They find almost none. The collapses were too total, too fast. If you were in the towers when they fell, you didn't make it out. The death toll estimate that night, 10,000 to 20,000. That number will drop over the next days as they realize there aren't bodies to find. Just dust. The final count, 2,977. Still the deadliest day on American soil since the Civil War, but not the apocalypse it felt like that first night. September 11th, 9 p.m. The FAA has grounded every plane in America. 4,546 flights, all diverted or landed within 2 hours. The skies are empty. For the first time since 1903, in Gander, Newfoundland, a tiny Canadian town of 10,000 people, 38 diverted planes land, carrying 6,600 passengers. The town houses and feeds them for 3 days. Strangers sleeping in schools, churches, community centers. It's one of the only good stories from that week. Across America, blood donation centers are overwhelmed. Lines around the block. People waiting hours to give blood. But there's nobody to give it to. Almost everyone at the World Trade Center is dead. You can't transfuse dust. Still, the blood banks take it, because people need to do something. Need to feel useful. September 12, 2001. Morning. America wakes up to a world that doesn't make sense. Every major newspaper has the same front page. Images of the towers. America under attack. A day of terror. Stock markets are closed. Will stay closed until September 17th, the longest shutdown since the Great Depression. Major League Baseball cancels games. The NFL postpones its entire week. Broadway goes dark. Everything stops because nobody knows what's safe anymore. Is this over? Or is this just the beginning? In Washington, intelligence agencies are scrambling. Who did this? Where did they come from? Are more attacks coming? By the morning of September 12th, they have the answer. Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, a terrorist network based in Afghanistan, protected by the Taliban government. But here's what most people don't know. The CIA had been warning about bin Laden for years. In 1998, Al-Qaeda bombed U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. 224 people killed. In 2000, they bombed the USS Cole in Yemen. 17 sailors killed. The CIA told the Bush administration in August 2001, 1 month before 9/11s, that bin Laden was planning a major attack inside the United States. The memo was titled, "Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S." Bush was on vacation in Texas when he received it. He didn't call a single meeting about it. Nobody stopped the 19 hijackers. 15 of them were from Saudi Arabia, America's closest Arab ally. They got U.S. visas, trained at American flight schools, lived openly. The system didn't fail. The system was asleep. And now, on September 12th, the system is wide awake, overcompensating, panicking. September 12th, 2001. Afternoon. Congress holds an emergency session. Democrats and Republicans, usually at each other's throats, stand together. Someone starts singing "God Bless America" on the Capitol steps. Others join. Within seconds, dozens of members of Congress are singing together. It's the last moment of genuine unity the country will have for the next 25 years. That evening, Congress passes a resolution. The authorization for use of military force against terrorists. It passes the Senate 98-0, the House 420-1. One person votes against it, Representative Barbara Lee from California. She stands on the House floor and says, "Let us not become the evil we deplore. She's booed, receives death threats, hate mail, accusations of treason. She was right. But in September 2001, being right doesn't matter. What matters is being strong. The AUMF gives the president authority to use all necessary and appropriate force against anyone connected to 9/11s. It doesn't name countries, doesn't set time limits, doesn't define connected. It's a blank check. And it's still being used today, 25 years later, to justify military operations in 85 countries. One vote, one day after 9/11s, still in effect. September 12, 2001, evening. In New York, missing person posters start appearing. Families who can't find their loved ones plaster walls with photos. Have you seen this person? Phone numbers, physical descriptions. Within days, Lower Manhattan is covered. Thousands of faces. Smiling photos from birthday parties, weddings, family gatherings. Almost none of them will be found alive. Rescue workers are still calling it a rescue operation, but they know there are no survivors in that rubble. This is a recovery mission now. They'll spend the next 8 months sifting through 1.8 million tons of debris, finding fragments, bone pieces, personal effects. Many victims will never be identified. Nearly 1,000 families never get remains back. But on September 12th, nobody's accepted that yet. The posters keep going up. The hope persists. Here's what else happened in those first 24 hours. Attorney General John Ashcroft orders the FBI to arrest anyone with suspected terrorist ties. Within a week, over 1,200 people are detained. Most are Muslim. Most are immigrants. Most have no connection to terrorism. Some are held for months without charges, without access to lawyers, in secret detention centers. The Constitution didn't stop working on September 11th, but a lot of people started acting like it did. The Bush administration starts drafting emergency legislation, expanding surveillance powers, weakening privacy protections, authorizing things that were illegal on September 10th. It will become the U.S. a Patriot Act, and it will pass in 45 days. NATO invokes Article 5 for the first time in its history. An attack on one member is an attack on all. For the first time ever, NATO is going to war to defend America. American allies around the world light up their monuments. The Eiffel Tower goes dark, then displays the American flag in lights. Berlin, London, Tokyo, Sydney. We are all Americans, declares a French newspaper, Le Monde, the day after. The global sympathy is real, total, universal. Within 2 years, America will have squandered it completely. September 13th, 2001. President Bush visits Ground Zero. The rubble is still smoking. Fire is still burning underground. Will burn for another 3 months. He climbs onto a pile of debris, grabs a megaphone. A rescue worker yells, "We can't hear you." Bush responds, "I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon." The crowd erupts. USA, USA, USA. That moment becomes iconic. Bush's approval rating hits 90%, the highest ever recorded for any president. But here's what that moment actually is. A promise of war. Not justice. War. Because the people who knocked these buildings down are already dead. They died in the plains. What Bush is promising is revenge against everyone connected, everyone who helped, everyone who sheltered them, everyone who shares their ideology. That's not a targeted response. That's a blank check for endless war. And Congress already gave it to him. By September 14th, the transformation is complete. 3 days. That's how long it took. On September 10th, America was a country debating tax cuts and Medicare reform. By September 14th, America is a country at war. With who? Doesn't matter yet. War is coming. The change happened so fast, there was no debate, no discussion. No dissent. You were either with us or against us. Either you supported whatever the government decided to do, or you were a traitor. That binary thinking that with us or against us mentality will define the next 25 years. It will justify invading Iraq, a country that had nothing to do with 9/11s. It will justify torture, waterboarding, enhanced interrogation. It will justify Guantanamo Bay, where prisoners are held for decades without trial. It will justify mass surveillance. The NSA reading your emails, recording your phone calls. All of it starts in those first 24 hours, when the shock was too great, the anger too raw, the fear too overwhelming. Rick Rescorla had 17 minutes to make a decision: evacuate or wait for instructions. He chose to act, and he saved 2,700 people. America had 24 hours to make a decision. Think carefully or react immediately. We chose to react, and we're still living with the consequences. In New York, the fires at Ground Zero will burn until December. 99 days. But the fires of anger, revenge, and fear, those are still burning 25 years later. Within 6 weeks, Congress will pass the PATRIOT Act, a law that changes what privacy means in America, what freedom means, what security costs. And it will pass with almost no debate, because in October 2001, asking questions makes you a suspect. Security doesn't come from being safe. It comes from feeling safe. And in October 2001, America was willing to trade anything to feel safe again. October 5th, 2001, West Palm Beach, Florida. Bob Stevens, a 63-year-old photo editor, dies at a hospital. Cause of death: inhalation anthrax. 3 days later, his co-worker at American Media Inc. tests positive for anthrax exposure. Then letters containing anthrax spores arrive at NBC News in New York, at the New York Post, at the offices of Senators Tom Daschle and Patrick Leahy in Washington. 1 week after anthrax letters start appearing, 5 people are dead, 17 infected, thousands exposed. And America is convinced this is the second wave: Al-Qaeda, biological weapons. Worse than 9/11s. It's not Al-Qaeda. It's an American scientist working at a U.S. Army biodefense lab. Bruce Evans. He won't be identified until 2008, when he kills himself before being charged. But in October 2001, nobody knows that. And the fear is exactly what the Bush administration needs. Because Congress is about to vote on something that 3 weeks earlier would have been political suicide. The U.S. Patriot Act, uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. Someone spent more time on the acronym than on reading the bill. Here's what happened in 45 days. September 11th, terrorist attack. September 12th, Attorney General John Ashcroft orders the Justice Department to draft new surveillance legislation. September 19th, the first draft of the Patriot Act is delivered to Congress, 342 pages. It was written in 1 week. October 11th, the Senate votes, 98-1 in favor. October 12th, the House votes, 357-66 in favor. October 26th, President Bush signs it into law. 45 days, from concept to law, for a bill that fundamentally changes American civil liberties. Most members of Congress never read it. Representative John Conyers, a Democrat from Michigan, later admitted, "We don't really read most of the bills. We physically don't have time." The bill was 342 pages, delivered to Congress just hours before the vote. No hearings, no debate, no amendments. If you voted against it, you were soft on terrorism, un-American, a traitor. Only one senator voted no, Russ Feingold from Wisconsin. He said on the Senate floor, "There is no doubt that if we lived in a police state, it would be easier to catch terrorists." But that wouldn't be a country in which we would want to live. He was right. He was also alone. So, what's actually in the Patriot Act? Let's skip the legal jargon. Here's what it does in practice. Section 215, the business records provision. The FBI can now demand any records from any business without a warrant. Library records, medical records, financial records, internet browsing history. The business owner can't tell you they've been subpoenaed. It's illegal to disclose. You'll never know the FBI is reading your emails. Before 9/11, this required a court order, probable cause, evidence of a crime. After the Patriot Act, the FBI just has to claim it's relevant to a terrorism investigation. Section 206, roving wiretaps. The government can now wiretap any phone a suspect might use. Not a specific phone, any phone, your phone, your neighbor's phone, a payphone. No warrant needed for each device. One blanket authorization. Before 9/11, you needed a separate warrant for each phone. Fourth Amendment stuff. After the Patriot Act, the Fourth Amendment has a terrorism exception. Section 802, expanded definition of domestic terrorism. This is the one nobody talks about. Domestic terrorism is now defined as any activity that appears to be intended to influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion. Read that again. Appears to be intended to influence the policy of a government. That could be a protest, a boycott, civil disobedience. Environmental activists blocking a pipeline? Domestic terrorism. The law is written so broadly, the government can apply it to almost anything. And once you're labeled a terrorist, even domestically, you lose constitutional protections. Indefinite detention. No trial, no lawyer. Not hypothetical. This has been used hundreds of times. But here's the part that changes everything. The Patriot Act wasn't just about catching terrorists. It was about building infrastructure. The NSA, the National Security Agency, had been wanting to expand mass surveillance for years. Intercept all communications, store everything, search it later. Before 9/11, that was illegal, unconstitutional, Orwellian. After the Patriot Act, it's national security. Within months of the law passing, the NSA launches a program called Stellar Wind. It collects metadata on every phone call made in America, every email sent, every internet search. Not just suspected terrorists, everyone. The program is classified, top secret. Nobody outside the NSA and a handful of Bush administration officials knows it exists. It won't be revealed until 2013 by a contractor named Edward Snowden. When Snowden leaks the documents, Americans learn that the NSA has been spying on them for 12 years, collecting everything, storing it in massive data centers. But in October 2001, nobody knows, because the Patriot Act doesn't explicitly authorize mass surveillance. It just removes the legal barriers, and the NSA fills the gap. Here's how it works. The NSA partners with telecom companies, AT&T, Verizon. They install equipment directly into the company's data centers, fiber optic splitters, copying every piece of data that flows through. The telecoms cooperate, some because they're ordered to, some because they're paid to, some because it's patriotic. And if you try to sue the telecom companies later, the Patriot Act gives them retroactive immunity. You can't hold them accountable. It's classified, national security. Here's the uncomfortable question nobody wants to answer. Did any of this stop terrorism? The government claims yes. Points to dozens of disrupted plots. Independent reviews say no. The NSA's own internal assessments, leaked by Snowden, admit that mass surveillance contributed to stopping exactly 0 terrorist attacks that couldn't have been stopped with traditional warrants. And 9/11's hijackers weren't hidden. The CIA knew some of their names. They were on watch lists. They got visas anyway. Flew anyway, weren't stopped. The problem wasn't lack of surveillance. It was lack of coordination, incompetence, bureaucracy. But surveillance is easier to sell than we need to fix our bureaucracy. So Congress passes a law that makes Americans less free without making them more safe. And because it's wrapped in the flag and signed in the shadow of 9/11s, questioning it makes you a suspect. November 19, 2001, Bush signs the Aviation and Transportation Security Act. The Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, is born. Before 9/11s, airport security was handled by private contractors, paid minimum wage, barely trained. The 9/11's hijackers walked through security with box cutters and knives. Both were legal to carry on planes at the time. So Congress federalizes airport security, hires 50,000 TSA agents, gives them uniforms and authority, and creates security theater. Because here's what the TSA actually does. Takes your shoes off. Because in 2001, Richard Reed tried to detonate explosives hidden in his shoes. He failed, but now everyone takes off their shoes. Forever. Bans liquids over 3.4 ounces. Because in 2006, terrorists plotted to use liquid explosives. The plot was stopped before anyone got on a plane. But now you can't bring shampoo. Forever. Full body scanners. Introduced in 2007. They can see through your clothes. Reveal your naked body to TSA agents. Privacy advocates call them unconstitutional. The TSA says it's necessary. That's the line. Always necessary. Except the TSA fails its own security tests, routinely. In 2015, Department of Homeland Security investigators ran undercover tests. They tried to smuggle fake weapons and explosives through TSA checkpoints. Success rate, 95%. The TSA missed 95% of threats. But you still have to take off your shoes. Because security theater isn't about stopping threats. It's about making you feel like threats are being stopped. It's about showing you that the government is doing something, even if that something doesn't work. December 2001. The first prisoners arrive at Guantanamo Bay. It's a naval base in Cuba. Leased from the Cuban government since 1903. Technically not on U.S. soil. That's the point. The Bush administration argues that because Guantanamo isn't in the United States, prisoners there don't have constitutional rights. No trials, no habeas corpus, no legal representation. They call them enemy combatants, not prisoners of war, not criminals. A new category, one without legal protections. By 2002, there are over 700 prisoners at Guantanamo. Many captured in Afghanistan, some captured in Pakistan, some bought from bounty hunters for $5,000 a head. Many have no connection to terrorism. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some are teenagers. The youngest is 15 years old. They're held indefinitely, interrogated. Some are tortured, though the government calls it enhanced interrogation. Waterboarding, sleep deprivation, stress positions, sensory overload. Techniques that, before 9/11s, the United States prosecuted as war crimes. After 9/11s, they're necessary. Over the next decade, most prisoners at Guantanamo will be released without charges. No evidence, no trial. Just years of detention and torture, then a flight home with no apology. 40 prisoners remain at Guantanamo today. In 2026, 25 years later. Some have never been charged. Some have been cleared for release, but have nowhere to go. Some are too broken to function. The facility costs $540 million per year to operate. That's $13 million per prisoner. And it's still open. Because closing Guantanamo is politically toxic. Soft on terrorism. Here's what we built in 45 days. A surveillance state that tracks every American. A security apparatus that fails 95% of tests, but never goes away. A detention system that holds people indefinitely without trial. A legal framework that calls torture, interrogation, and mass surveillance metadata collection. And we built it in the same amount of time most people spend planning a wedding. No debate, no reflection, no consideration of consequences, just fear, and the politicians who weaponized it. Because here's the thing about the Patriot Act, the TSA, Guantanamo, all of it. It was supposed to be temporary, emergency measures, sunset clauses. None of it was temporary. The Patriot Act has been renewed 4 times. Most recently in 2020, the TSA is permanent. A bureaucracy of 60,000 employees with a $10 billion annual budget. Guantanamo is still open, 25 years later. Temporary measures become permanent when nobody has the courage to end them. And in America after 9/11s, courage meant going along, not asking questions, not demanding accountability. Rick Rescorla acted on instinct and saved 2,700 people. Congress acted on fear and built a surveillance state. Within weeks, the infrastructure was in place. The laws passed. The programs launched. And by the time Americans realized what they traded, it was too late to get it back. Because the next step wasn't defense. It was offense. Afghanistan, then Iraq, then everywhere. The war on terror was about to go global. Wars used to take months to plan, coalitions to build, diplomacy to exhaust. After 9/11s, America went from victim to invader in 26 days. September 20th, 2001, 9 days after the towers fell, President Bush addresses a joint session of Congress. The chamber is packed. Supreme Court justices, cabinet members, senators and representatives from both parties. The entire government, together, for the first time since 9/11s. Bush speaks for 36 minutes. The speech is part eulogy, part war declaration. He names the enemy, Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, the Taliban government in Afghanistan that shelters them. Then he issues an ultimatum. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of Al-Qaeda who hide in your land. Close immediately every terrorist training camp. Hand over every terrorist and their supporters. Give the United States full access to terrorist training camps for inspection. And then the line that ends diplomacy. These demands are not open to negotiation or discussion. The Taliban must act and act immediately. They will hand over the terrorists, or they will share in their fate. No negotiation. No discussion. Comply or be destroyed. The Taliban asked for evidence that bin Laden was behind 9/11s. They offer to try him in an Islamic court. They suggest extraditing him to a third country. Bush's response, non-negotiable. You have days, not weeks. On October 7th, 2001, 26 days after the ultimatum, the United States invades Afghanistan. The fastest mobilization for war in modern American history. Here's what nobody talks about. The invasion was planned before the ultimatum. On September 12th, the day after the attacks, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld told his aides, judge whether good enough to hit S.H. Saddam Hussein at same time. Not only UBL, Osama bin Laden, one day after 9/11s, and they're already talking about Iraq. Afghanistan wasn't the war the Bush administration wanted. It was the war they had to fight first. Iraq was the prize. Saddam Hussein, regime change, control of Middle Eastern oil. But you can't sell Iraq in September 2001. The connection to 9/11s is too thin, non-existent, actually. So Afghanistan first, then Iraq. That's the plan. On September 13th, CIA Director George Tenet delivers a plan to Bush. It's been sitting in a drawer, ready, waiting for an excuse. Work with the Northern Alliance Afghan rebels who've been fighting the Taliban for years. Provide air support, special forces, weapons, money. Topple the Taliban. Install a friendly government. Find bin Laden. Timeline, a few months. Cost, minimal. Risk, low. That's the promise in September 2001. By 2021, When the war finally ends, it will have lasted 20 years, cost $2.3 trillion, and killed 176,000 people. But in October 2001, nobody's thinking about that. October 7th, 2001, Operation Enduring Freedom begins. The name is important. Not Operation Afghan Freedom. Not Operation Justice. Enduring Freedom. Because this isn't about Afghanistan. It's about a permanent state of war. The first strikes are cruise missiles and bombers. Tomahawk missiles launched from ships in the Arabian Sea. B-52 bombers flying from Diego Garcia, an island base in the Indian Ocean. They hit Taliban positions, Al-Qaeda training camps, radar installations, command centers. Within hours, U.S. Special Forces are on the ground. Delta Force, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, working with Northern Alliance fighters. And it works, shockingly well. By November 9th, just over a month into the war, Mazar-i-Sharif falls to Northern Alliance forces, backed by U.S. airstrikes. November 13th, Kabul, the capital, falls. Taliban forces retreat without a fight. December 7th, Kandahar, the Taliban's spiritual home, surrenders. 2 months. That's how long it takes to topple the Taliban government. Mission accomplished, right? Not even close. Because the war was never just about the Taliban. It was about bin Laden, and bin Laden is still free. In November 2001, intelligence reports place him in the Tora Bora Cave Complex, a mountainous region on the Afghan-Pakistan border, honeycombed with tunnels. Natural fortress. The Pentagon sends Afghan militia forces to hunt him down, backed by U.S. airstrikes and a small team of special forces. They don't send ground troops, American soldiers, the people who could actually corner him. Why not? Rumsfeld later says he didn't want a massive American footprint, wanted Afghans to take the lead, didn't want to look like an occupying force. The real reason, Rumsfeld was already planning Iraq. He didn't want to commit too many troops to Afghanistan. In December 2001, bin Laden escapes Tora Bora, crosses into Pakistan, disappears. He won't be found for another 10 years. May 2011, Abbottabad, Pakistan. Navy SEALs kill him in a compound 800 yards from a Pakistani military academy. 10 years. Because in December 2001, catching him wasn't the priority. Here's what the Afghanistan war becomes. The Taliban government collapses. But the Taliban fighters don't disappear. They retreat into Pakistan, regroup. Wait, the U.S. installs Hamid Karzai as president of Afghanistan, a Pashtun leader acceptable to the West, friendly, pro-democracy. He's also corrupt. His government is riddled with warlords, drug traffickers, and cronies. But that's a problem for later. In early 2002, the Bush administration shifts focus. Afghanistan is liberated. The Taliban is defeated. Bin Laden is on the run. Time to move on to Iraq. Troops start being pulled from Afghanistan. Resources redirected. The hunt for bin Laden downgraded. Afghanistan becomes a holding operation, not a war. A background mission. And the Taliban notices. By 2003, they're launching attacks again. Small at first. Testing. Probing. By 2006, it's a full insurgency. Suicide bombings. IEDs. Assassinations. The war that was won in 2 months drags on for 2 decades. Let's talk about the cost. 2,456 American soldiers killed in Afghanistan over 20 years. 20,666 American soldiers wounded, but the real cost is Afghan. 46,319 Afghan civilians killed. Another 100,000 plus wounded or displaced. 66,000 Afghan military and police killed. And that's just direct deaths. Doesn't count starvation, disease, infrastructure collapse. The Taliban, which the U.S. defeated in 2 months, retakes Afghanistan in August 2021. after 20 years of war. The final image: Afghans clinging to a U.S. cargo plane as it takes off from Kabul airport. Some fall to their deaths. The world watches in horror. 20 years, $2.3 trillion, 170,000 plus dead. And Afghanistan ends up right back where it started, under Taliban control. But here's the part that connects to everything else. Afghanistan wasn't a failure of military strategy. It was a failure of mission creep. In October 2001, the mission was clear: destroy Al-Qaeda, remove the Taliban, capture bin Laden. That could have been done in months. It almost was. But the mission changed. Nation building, democracy promotion, women's rights, infrastructure, governance. None of that was part of the original plan. But once you're there, once you've toppled a government, you own it. Colin Powell called it the pottery barn rule. You break it, you own it. And America broke Afghanistan. So we stayed and stayed and stayed because leaving meant admitting it. It was all for nothing. That the lives lost, the money spent, the years waste, and all of it didn't accomplish the mission. And nobody wants to be the president who lost Afghanistan. So Bush doesn't leave. Obama doesn't leave. Trump doesn't leave. Biden finally leaves in August 2021 and gets crucified for it, even though the war was unwinnable. Even though staying meant more deaths for no gain. Leaving was political suicide. So we stayed for 20 years. November 25, 2001, Kala-i-Jani Fortress, northern Afghanistan. A prison uprising. Taliban prisoners revolt. Seize weapons. Take control of part of the fortress. CIA officer Johnny Mike Spann is there, interrogating prisoners. When the revolt starts, he's surrounded, beaten to death. He's the first American killed in combat in Afghanistan. His death barely makes the news, because by late November, the war already feels old, already feels won. The American public has moved on. The media has moved on. But the soldiers haven't. They're still there, still fighting. By 2002, there are 10,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. By 2010, over 100,000. The quick war becomes the forever war. And it sets a precedent. America can invade countries, topple governments, and stay indefinitely without a clear mission or exit strategy. And nobody will stop it. Because questioning the war means you don't support the troops. That logic conflating criticism of policy with disloyalty to soldiers becomes the shield that protects every bad decision for the next 20 years. Here's the question nobody wanted to answer in 2001. What does victory look like? Kill bin Laden? Remove the Taliban? Destroy Al-Qaeda? All of that could have been done by 2002, but victory kept getting redefined. Stable government, democracy, women's education, economic development, counter-narcotics, counterinsurgency, goals that take decades, maybe generations, maybe forever. And when victory is undefined, the war never ends. Rick Rescorla had a clear mission: evacuate 2,700 people. He did it. Mission accomplished. America's mission in Afghanistan was never clear, so it never ended, until it ended in failure, in chaos, in Afghans falling from planes. By October 2001, America had a choice: targeted strikes, special operations, hunt bin Laden, leave, or nation building, occupation, permanent war. We chose the second option, and we're still paying for it. Because the war in Afghanistan wasn't the end. It was the beginning. It proved America could invade anywhere, anytime, with minimal debate and maximum support. It proved that the war on terror could justify anything. And in 2002, the Bush administration looked at that precedent and thought, Iraq, not because Iraq attacked us, not because Iraq had ties to 9/11s, but because we could, and nobody would stop us. The war that started in 30 days was about to become the war that never ended. And the next war, Iraq, wouldn't even have the excuse of 9/11s, just lies. And the momentum we built in Afghanistan. The Afghanistan war had an excuse. Iraq didn't, so they made one up. January 29, 2002, 4 months after the Afghanistan invasion, President Bush delivers his State of the Union address, the first since 9/11s. He talks about the war on terror, about Afghanistan's liberation, about America's strength and resolve. Then he says something new. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world. Axis of evil. 3 countries, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. None of them were involved in 9/11s. None of them harbored Al-Qaeda. None of them attacked America. But Bush just linked them to terrorism anyway. The phrase axis of evil isn't accidental. It echoes World War II, the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, Japan. It's designed to make you think, existential threat. Fight them or they'll destroy us. But here's the problem. Iraq, Iran, and North Korea hate each other. They're not allied. They're not coordinating. There's no axis. It's a rhetorical trick, grouping enemies together to justify grouping wars together. And the real target is Iraq, not because Iraq is the biggest threat, but because Iraq is the easiest target. Here's what the Bush administration knows in January 2002. Saddam Hussein is a brutal dictator. He gassed Kurds in 1988, invaded Kuwait in 1990, runs torture prisons, kills political opponents. But he's also contained, weakened, surrounded by no-fly zones, inspected by UN weapons teams. He's not a threat to the United States, and the CIA knows it. But Saddam Hussein is also sitting on the world's second-largest oil reserves, and he's hostile to American interests in the Middle East. The neoconservatives in Bush's administration, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, have wanted to invade Iraq since the 1990s. In 1998, they signed an open letter to President Clinton calling for regime change in Iraq, not because of weapons, not because of terrorism, because Saddam's government was a hazard to American interests. 9/11s gave them the excuse they'd been waiting for. But here's the problem. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11s. The hijackers were from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE, Lebanon, not Iraq. Al-Qaeda is a Sunni extremist group. Saddam Hussein ran a secular Ba'athist regime. They hated each other. Osama bin Laden called Saddam an infidel. Saddam called bin Laden a fanatic. There was no alliance, no connection, no collaboration. The Bush administration knew this. The CIA told them this, but they needed a reason, a justification the American public would accept. So they invented one. Weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, chemical weapons, biological weapons, maybe nuclear weapons. Iraq, they claimed, was building an arsenal that could threaten the United States and its allies. And if Saddam gave those weapons to terrorists Al-Qaeda, maybe America could face another 9/11s, but worse, a nuclear 9/11s. That story, that nightmare scenario, became the justification for war, and almost none of it was true. September 2002, the propaganda campaign begins. Dick Cheney appears on Meet the Press. He says Saddam has reconstituted his nuclear weapons program. He hasn't. The CIA knows he hasn't. Condoleezza Rice, the National Security Advisor, says, "We don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud." There is no smoking gun. There is no nuclear program. Donald Rumsfeld says Iraq has chemical and biological weapon stockpiles. We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad. They're not. They don't exist. Colin Powell, the most respected member of Bush's cabinet, the former general, the one with credibility, is sent to the United Nations. February 5, 2003. Powell addresses the UN Security Council. He holds up a vial of white powder. Says it represents anthrax. Says Iraq has 25,000 liters of anthrax, 38,000 liters of botulinum toxin, 500 tons of sarin and mustard gas. He shows satellite photos. Says they're mobile weapons labs, trucks that can produce biological weapons, then move before inspectors find them. He plays audio recordings. Says they're Iraqi officers discussing hiding weapons from inspectors. The presentation lasts 76 minutes. It's detailed, it's specific, it's convincing, and almost all of it is wrong. Here's what Powell didn't know, or chose not to know. The source for the mobile weapons labs was an Iraqi defector codenamed Curveball, man the CIA had never directly interviewed, a man German intelligence said was unreliable, a fabricator. The CIA used his testimony anyway, because it supported the narrative. The aluminum tubes that Powell said were for uranium enrichment. The Department of Energy said they were for conventional rockets, not nuclear. The Bush administration ignored that assessment, cited the minority opinion instead. The claim that Iraq tried to buy yellowcake uranium from Niger? Based on forged documents. The CIA knew they were forged. The claim made it into Bush's 2003 State of the Union anyway. The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. 16 words, all of them misleading. The documents were fake. The intelligence was fabricated. The claim was false. But it sounded scary, and scary sells wars. Here's the most damning part. The CIA had doubts. The State Department had doubts. Weapons inspectors on the ground in Iraq found nothing. In early 2003, UN inspectors led by Hans Blix were searching Iraq for WMDs. They found nothing. No facilities. No evidence of an active program. Blix asked for more time. A few more months to complete inspections. The Bush administration said no. We've waited long enough. Because the inspections were finding the truth, there were no WMDs, and the truth was inconvenient. If inspectors proved Iraq didn't have weapons, the justification for war disappears. So the war had to start before the inspections finished. On March 17, 2003, Bush gives Saddam Hussein and his sons 48 hours to leave Iraq. It's not a real offer. It's a countdown to invasion. March 19, 2003. The deadline expires. Operation Iraqi Freedom begins. The war starts with shock and awe. Massive bombing campaign over Baghdad, over military installations, over government buildings. The goal: overwhelm Iraqi defenses, break their will to fight, decapitate the regime. Within 3 weeks, American forces reach Baghdad. Saddam's government collapses. His statue is pulled down in Ferdo Square on April 9th. On May 1, 2003, Bush lands on the USS Abraham Lincoln. A banner behind him reads, "Mission accomplished." He declares, "Major combat operations in Iraq have ended. The war has lasted 6 weeks, 139 American soldiers dead, Iraqi military destroyed, Saddam in hiding, mission accomplished." Except it's not. Because here's what nobody planned for. What happens after you topple the government? The Bush administration thought Iraqis would welcome American troops as liberators. Thought a new democratic government would form quickly. Thought stability would follow. None of that happened. Instead, chaos. The Iraqi military dissolves. 400,000 soldiers, suddenly unemployed with weapons. The Ba'athist government is banned from holding any positions. Thousands of experienced administrators, teachers, police jobless overnight. Paul Bremer, the U.S. administrator in Iraq, makes these decisions in the first month of occupation. They're catastrophic. The unemployed soldiers become insurgents. The banned administrators become organizers. The power vacuum fills with violence. By summer 2003, IEDs start appearing. Roadside bombs, ambushes, sniper attacks. The mission-accomplished war turns into an occupation, then an insurgency, then a civil war. Sunni versus Shia. Insurgents versus occupation. Al-Qaeda in Iraq, a group that didn't exist before the invasion, emerges. By 2006, Iraq is descending into hell. Suicide bombings daily. Sectarian massacres. Torture. Death squads. The Abu Ghraib scandal breaks in 2004. Photos of American soldiers torturing Iraqi prisoners. Hooded detainees. Attack dogs. Sexual humiliation. The images destroy whatever moral authority America had left. We invaded to remove a dictator who tortured people. And then we tortured people. Let's talk about the cost. 4,491 American soldiers killed in Iraq. 32,292 American soldiers wounded. But the real devastation is Iraqi. Conservative estimates, 200,000 Iraqi civilians killed. Liberal estimates, over 600,000. Millions displaced. Millions more fled the country. Infrastructure destroyed. Government collapsed. Society shattered. The war cost America $2 trillion. That's not counting long-term veterans' care. Not counting interest on borrowed money. Total cost, according to Brown University's Costs of War project, $8 trillion for the entire war on terror. And what did we get? Saddam Hussein was captured in December 2003, found hiding in a hole near Tikrit, tried, executed by hanging in 2006, but Iraq didn't become a democracy. It became a failed state. ISIS, the Islamic State, rose from the ashes of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. By 2014, they controlled a third of Iraq and Syria, declared a caliphate, committed genocide against Yazidis. The chaos we created in Iraq spread across the region. Syria's civil war, Libya's collapse, the refugee crisis, the rise of authoritarianism. All of it traces back, in part, to the decision to invade Iraq in 2003. And here's the cruelest part. There were no WMDs. After the invasion, American forces searched Iraq. Teams of inspectors, military units, intelligence operatives. They found nothing. No chemical weapons stockpiles. No biological weapons labs. No nuclear program. Everything Colin Powell said at the UN was wrong. In 2005, Powell called his UN speech a blot on his record. Said he was given faulty intelligence. But the intelligence wasn't faulty. It was cherry-picked, manipulated, fabricated. The Bush administration didn't make a mistake. They lied because the war was never about WMDs. It was about regime change, oil, geopolitical power. The WMDs were just the excuse. Rick Rescorla made a decision based on the best information he had, and he was right. The Bush administration made a decision despite the best information they had, and they were wrong. But Rick Rescorla died for his decision. Bush administration officials retired with book deals and speaking fees. Here's what Iraq proves about 9/11's legacy. The fear created by 9/11's didn't just justify one war. It justified anything. Afghanistan, you could argue, was defensive. Retaliation. Justice. Iraq was offensive. Preemptive. A war of choice. And it happened because after 9/11's, questioning war made you unpatriotic. In October 2002, Congress voted to authorize the use of force in Iraq. Senate, 77-23. House, 296-133. Democrats and Republicans together. Overwhelming support, based on lies. But if you questioned the lies, you were accused of helping terrorists. The media didn't challenge the administration. They amplified it. New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, All of them ran stories about WMDs without scrutiny. Judith Miller at the New York Times wrote article after article citing anonymous sources about Iraq's weapons programs. Those sources were Iraqi exiles with an agenda, fabricators, the same people feeding the Bush administration false intelligence. The Times later apologized, but the damage was done. By the time the truth came out, no WMDs, no threat, no justification, it was too late. The war had already started, and stopping it would mean admitting it was all a lie. So it kept going. For 8 years, until Obama withdrew troops in 2011. Then ISIS rose, and troops went back in 2014. The war that was supposed to last 6 weeks is still going 23 years later. September 11th, 2001, killed 2,977 people. The wars that followed killed over 900,000. That's the legacy, not just the attack, but what we chose to do after. Afghanistan was supposed to be quick. It lasted 20 years. Iraq was supposed to be easy. It's still unstable. The surveillance state was supposed to be temporary. It's permanent. Guantanamo was supposed to close. It's still open. Everything that was supposed to end is still here. Because the war on terror doesn't have an endpoint. It's not a war against a country. It's a war against a tactic, a concept, and you can't surrender to a concept. You can't negotiate with a tactic, so the war never ends. 25 years later, American troops are still deployed in 85 countries as part of counterterrorism operations. Drones still strike targets in Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, Syria. The PATRIOT Act has been renewed 4 times. The TSA is still making you take off your shoes. And we're still living in the world we built in the 45 days after 9/11s. A world where fear justifies anything, where questioning authority is suspicious, where wars start in weeks and last for decades. That's not what the passengers on Flight 93 died for. Not what the firefighters climbing the towers died for. They died fighting back against terrorism. We responded by becoming what we feared. September 11th, 2001 didn't just change that day. It changed every day since. January 20th, 2009, Barack Obama's inauguration. One of his first executive orders: close Guantanamo Bay Detention Center within 1 year. It's still open. In 2026, March 2013, Edward Snowden, an NSA contractor, starts leaking classified documents to journalists. The revelations: the NSA is collecting phone records on millions of Americans, reading emails, tracking internet activity, mass surveillance, no warrants, no oversight. Everything the Patriot Act made possible. Everything Americans were told wasn't happening. It was happening. For 12 years before anyone knew. August 2021. Taliban forces retake Kabul. The Afghan government collapses in 11 days. Desperate Afghans cling to a U.S. cargo plane as it takes off. Some fall to their deaths. The world watches in horror. 20 years. $2.3 trillion. 2,456 American soldiers dead. 46,000 Afghan civilians dead. And Afghanistan ends exactly where it started, under Taliban control. These aren't isolated failures. They're the legacy of September 11th, 2001, not the attack, the response. Let's start with what actually changed, what never went back to normal. Airport security. Before 9/11s, you could walk family members to the gate. No ID required for domestic flights. Pocket knives and small blades were allowed. Security took minutes. After 9/11s, 3-hour lines, shoes off. Liquids in 3.4-ounce containers. Full-body scanners that see you naked. Say agents with authority to detain you for anything. And it doesn't work. In 2015, Department of Homeland Security ran covert tests. Undercover agents tried to smuggle fake weapons and explosives through TSA checkpoints at 70 airports. Success rate, 95%. The TSA missed 67 out of 70 threats. But you still take off your shoes, because it's not about security. It's about the appearance of security. Security theater. Make people feel safe without actually making them safer. Cost, $10 billion per year. 60,000 TSA employees. Millions of hours of American lives wasted in lines. Benefit, unclear. Surveillance. Before 9/11s, the NSA spied on foreign governments. The FBI needed warrants to wiretap Americans. The Fourth Amendment meant something. After 9/11s, the NSA collects everything. Every phone call, every email, every text message, every Google search. They call it metadata. Just phone numbers and timestamps, not the content of calls. But metadata reveals everything. Who you call, when, for how long, where you are, who you know. An NSA analyst once said, "We kill people based on metadata." In 2013, Snowden reveals PRISM, a program that gives the NSA direct access to servers at Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Yahoo. They're not requesting data, they're taking it. In real time, the government's defense. We're only targeting terrorists. The documents Snowden leaked prove that's a lie. They're collecting everything. On everyone, American citizens included. In 2015, Congress passes the USA Freedom Act. It's supposed to rein in the NSA, end bulk collection. It doesn't. The programs continue, just under different names. Because once you build a surveillance state, you don't dismantle it. You rebrand it. Cost, classified. Estimates range from $10 billion to $50 billion per year. Benefit. According to the NSA's own internal review, leaked by Snowden, mass surveillance contributed to stopping 0 terrorist attacks that couldn't have been stopped with traditional warrants. 0. Torture. The word the Bush administration used was enhanced interrogation techniques. Waterboarding, simulated drowning. Done 183 times to one detainee. Sleep deprivation. Forcing prisoners to stay awake for 11 days straight. Stress positions. Chaining prisoners in painful positions for hours. Rectal feeding. Exactly what it sounds like. These are techniques the United States prosecuted as war crimes after World War II. After 9/11s, they became policy. The CIA operated black sites, secret prisons in Poland, Romania, Thailand, Afghanistan, places where prisoners could be tortured without oversight. Some prisoners were innocent, grabbed by mistake, held for years, tortured, then released without apology. Khalid el-Masri, a German citizen, kidnapped in Macedonia in 2003, flown to Afghanistan, tortured for 5 months. Then the CIA realized, wrong guy, same name, different person. They dumped him on a road in Albania, told him to forget it happened. He sued. U.S. courts dismissed the case, state secrets privilege. In 2014, the Senate Intelligence Committee releases a report on CIA torture. Key findings. Torture didn't produce useful intelligence. Torture didn't stop any attacks. The CIA lied to Congress about what they were doing. The report is 6,700 pages. Only the 500-page summary is declassified. Nobody is prosecuted. Nobody goes to jail. Nobody is held accountable. Because it was all done in the name of stopping the next 9/11s. Guantanamo Bay. January 2002. First prisoners arrive. The facility is supposed to be temporary. For high-value detainees, dangerous terrorists. Peak population, 780 prisoners. How many were actually dangerous terrorists? The government's own review, years later, clears over 500 for release. No threat, no intelligence value. Held anyway. Some were bought from bounty hunters. $5,000 per terrorist. Pakistanis and Afghans turned in neighbors for cash. Some were teenagers. The youngest, Omar Khadr, was 15 when captured, held for 10 years before trial. Some were tortured, some went insane, some died. None received fair trials, because Guantanamo exists in a legal black hole, not on U.S. soil, so no constitutional rights. Not governed by the Geneva Conventions, because they're enemy combatants, not prisoners of war. A legal category invented to avoid legal protections. Obama promised to close it. Couldn't. Congress blocked funding to transfer prisoners. Trump promised to keep it open. Fill it with more prisoners. Didn't. Today, in 2026, 40 prisoners remain. Some have been there for 24 years, without trial. Cost, $540 million per year, $13 million per prisoner. You could house them in the Ritz-Carlton for less. The forever wars. Afghanistan, 20 years, $2.3 trillion. Taliban back in power. Iraq, 8 years officially. Troops withdrawn 2011. ISIS emerges 2014. Troops return. Still there today. But the war on terror spread far beyond Afghanistan and Iraq. U.S. military operations in Yemen, drone strikes since 2002. Somalia, special forces operations since 2007. Pakistan, drone strikes, killed thousands. Libya, 2011 intervention. Country collapsed. Syria, intervention since 2014. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, counterterrorism operations. As of 2026, U.S. troops are deployed in 85 countries for counterterrorism missions. 85 countries. Total deaths in the war on terror, according to Brown University's Costs of War project, 7,057 U.S. soldiers, 8,000 plus U.S. contractors, 177,000, Afghan and Iraqi security forces, 432,000. Civilians killed directly 3.6 to 3.8 million deaths total, including indirect deaths from war starvation, disease, displacement. Cost, over $8 trillion. And what did we get? Afghanistan, back under Taliban control. Iraq, unstable, corrupt, Iranian-influenced government. ISIS, defeated territorially, but still active. Al-Qaeda, weakened, but not destroyed. New affiliates in Africa, Middle East, South Asia. Terrorism didn't end. It metastasized. Here's the uncomfortable question. Did any of this make us safer? The Department of Homeland Security says yes. Points to disrupted plots. But most of those plots were FBI sting operations. Undercover agents encouraging vulnerable people to plan attacks, then arresting them. The terrorist attacks that did happen in the U.S. after 9/11's. Boston Marathon, bombing 2013. 2 brothers. Homemade pressure cooker bombs. 3 dead, 264 injured. San Bernardino, 2015. Married couple. 14 dead. Orlando Pulse nightclub, 2016. Lone gunman. 49 dead. Las Vegas, 2017. Not terrorism, but deadliest mass shooting. 60 dead. None of these were prevented by mass surveillance. None were stopped by the Patriot Act. None were disrupted by the TSA. The threat changed. From organized groups to radicalized individuals. From foreign terrorists to homegrown extremists. And the trillion-dollar security apparatus we built? Irrelevant? Because you can't stop a lone individual with unlimited surveillance. You can't prevent radicalization with torture. You can't bomb an ideology. But we tried for 25 years, and we're still trying. Let's talk about what we lost. Privacy, the assumption that your communications are private unless the government has a warrant. Gone. Habeas corpus. The right to know why you're being detained and challenge your detention in court. Suspended for enemy combatants. The presumption of innocence. The idea that you're innocent until proven guilty. Replaced with You're suspicious until proven harmless. International moral authority. The idea that America stands for human rights, rule of law, democracy. Destroyed by torture, illegal detention, and wars based on lies. Fiscal responsibility. The idea that wars should be paid for, not borrowed for. The war on terror added $8 trillion to the national debt. Unity. The brief moment after 9/11 when Americans came together. Replaced by partisan warfare, or one side questions the other's patriotism. This is the world we built in response to 9/11, not the world the terrorists created. The world we created. Rick Rescorla saved 2,700 people because he acted on clear thinking and preparation. America lost that clarity the moment the towers fell. We didn't ask, what's the smartest response? We asked, what's the strongest response? And strength looked like war, surveillance, torture, indefinite detention. It looked like revenge. But revenge doesn't make you safer. It just makes you feel better. And 25 years later, we're not safer. We're just poorer, more divided, and more afraid. The TSA makes flying miserable, but doesn't stop terrorism. The NSA reads your emails, but doesn't prevent attacks. Guantanamo costs $13 million per prisoner per year, but doesn't deliver justice. The wars killed hundreds of thousands, but didn't end terrorism. All of it, every program, every war, every law was supposed to make sure 9/11s never happened again. And it won't. Not that way. Not with planes and towers. But the next attack, when it comes, will be different. Cyber-attic, bioterrorism, something we didn't prepare for. Because we spent 25 years fighting the last war. Here's the legacy of September 11th, 2001. 2,977 people died that morning. But the world that died was bigger than that. The world where Americans didn't fear their own government. The world where privacy was a right, not a privilege. The world where wars had clear objectives and endpoints. The world where America was a moral leader, not a torturer. That world ended on September 11th, not because of the attack, because of the response. And 25 years later, we're still living in the ruins, still taking off our shoes, still being surveilled, still fighting wars that started before today's soldiers were born, still afraid. Rick Rescorla died on September 11th, 2001, but his legacy is clear. He saved 2,700 people. What's America's legacy? We turned fear into policy, revenge into strategy, temporary into permanent. And we never asked, is this making us better? Or just making us feel better? The answer is obvious now. We didn't prevent the next 9/11s. We became it, not in body count, but in impact, in transformation, in the world we created. September 11th, 2001 lasted 102 minutes. The world it created is still here. And it's not the world the victims would have wanted.